Hello, welcome to the Intellectual Minds Hub. In this video, we will discuss about the history and the rise of Taliban. Taliban is an ultra-conservative political and religious faction that emerged in Afghanistan in the mid-1990s, following the withdrawal of Soviet troops, the collapse of Afghanistan's communist regime, and the subsequent breakdown in civil order. This slide is showing the membership and the leadership structure of the Taliban. It began as a small force of Afghan religious students and scholars seeking to confront crime and corruption. Taliban emerged in the aftermath of Afghan war. Afghanistan's new government failed to establish civil order outside of Kabul, and much of the country was subject to frequent extortion and assault from local militias and the warlords. Facing mass displacement during the war, many Afghans found solidarity in the religious rhetoric of the Mujahideen resistance and opportunity in schools of Islamic sciences in southern and northern Afghanistan and northern Pakistan. In 1994, a group of former fighters associated with the madrasa in a village of Kandahar province successfully subdued a local warlord and began pacifying nearby areas. The faction, which enjoyed popular support with its promise of security and its religious fervor, quickly grew into the movement now known as Taliban. By late 1996, the Taliban had seized the capital Kabul and gained effective control over some two-thirds of the country. Taliban faced significant resistance, especially after it asserted its own interpretation of law and order. By 2001, the Taliban controlled all but a small section of northern Afghanistan, and only Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates ever recognized the regime. US invasion of Afghanistan, also known as Operation Enduring Freedom, was a military intervention that began in October 2001 in response to September 11 terrorist attacks on the US. The invasion aimed to remove the Taliban regime from power and eliminate the safe haven that Afghanistan provided for the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, responsible for the attacks. On September 11, 2001, Al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. They crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center towers in New York City and another in the Pentagon in Virginia. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to regain control from the hijackers. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in the attacks. Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, claimed responsibility for the attacks. The US and its allies determined that Afghanistan, then under Taliban rule, was providing sanctuary to Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. Taliban's refusal to hand over bin Laden for his role in the attacks led to growing international pressure. In the aftermath of the attacks, the US sought international support for its response. United Nations Security Council issued Resolution 1368, which condemned the attacks and recognized the right of self-defense. The US engaged in diplomatic efforts to build a coalition of nations to support military action. On October 7, 2001, the US and its allies launched Operation Enduring Freedom. US and the British forces initiated airstrikes against Taliban and Al-Qaeda targets in Afghanistan. The Northern Alliance, an Afghan anti-Taliban resistance group, cooperated with the coalition forces on the ground. The Taliban regime quickly lost control of major cities and strongholds as coalition forces advanced. The Northern Alliance, with international support, played a significant role in the Taliban's defeat. The Bonn Agreement, signed in December 2001, established an interim administration and set the stage for transitional government. Hamid Karzai became the interim leader, later becoming the first president of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Even after bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were found responsible for the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City and on the Pentagon outside Washington that had occurred on September 11, 2001, Taliban refused to extradite bin Laden. US and its allies began bombarding Afghanistan in October and supported the efforts of the Northern Alliance, a group of anti-Taliban factions in Afghanistan that had been resisting the Taliban's takeover of the country. In early December, the Northern Alliance succeeded in toppling the Taliban regime. Although driven from power and fractured, the Taliban survived, and many of its core members remained at large throughout the Afghanistan war. Its founder and leader, Mullah Muhammad Umar, remained in hiding with infrequent contact. but senior commanders such as Mullah Dadullah and Mullah Abdul Ghani were increasingly centralizing the group's command structure. It adopted new tactics modeled on those being used by insurgents in the Iraq War, including the use of suicide bombings and improvised explosive devices. In 2009, as fighting grew to unprecedented levels, newly elected US President Barack Obama ordered a surge in the US troop presence in the war. In July 2015, the Afghan government discovered that Umar had died in 2013 in a hospital in Pakistan. His deputy Mullah Akhtar Mansour briefly served as his successor until he was killed in a US airstrike in Pakistan in May 2016. Officials under President Hamid Karzai had met informally with the Taliban leaders, most notably Brother, and the first formal meeting was held under President Ashraf Ghani. The Taliban continued to see the central government as fundamentally illegitimate, however, and insisted on talks with the foreign power that had installed it, the United States. Taliban and the US began meeting in 2018 with the help of Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and UAE, the only countries to have a diplomatic relationship with both parties. Discussions focused on the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, although the US also sought to reconcile the Taliban and the central government. Discussions were eventually held with the central government in 2019, which led in July to an agreement on general principles for future negotiations. But the Taliban's representatives remained focused on first reaching a deal with the US. They reportedly came to an agreement in principle in September, but discussions were disrupted after an attack by the Taliban killed a US service member. A deal with the US was signed in Feb 2020. In exchange for a full withdrawal of US troops over a 14-month period, the Taliban agreed to end its attack on the US forces. The deal also included an agreement to begin talks with the central government within 10 days. But negotiations were delayed until September because of the central government's reluctance to carry out a prisoner swamp promised to the Taliban by the US. Little progress was made during the negotiation, which lasted into 2021. Nevertheless, in April, the US reiterated its commitment to complete its withdrawal, although the deadline for the withdrawal was delayed from May to September. As its confrontations with the US forces came to an end and the completion of the US withdrawal drew near, an emboldened Taliban rapidly took control of dozens of districts in May to June and closed in on several provincial capitals. The group appeared to lack the manpower and firepower to hold its gain against the larger and better equipped armed forces of the central government. But the latter's lack of coordination and lack of responsiveness to the insurgency allowed the Taliban to overrun the country within months. By mid-August, the central government had collapsed, and the Taliban had captured nearly all of the country, including Kabul. With the Taliban seemingly eager to win legitimacy both domestically and internationally, many observers hoped to see a more pliant and conciliatory regime than the one Taliban had run before. Early indications, however, showed little resolve for change. In September, it filled its transitional government with hardliners, reopened secondary school only for boys, and reinstituted the brutal criminal punishments for which it had been known. Taliban's rule is marked by severe restrictions on human rights and civil liberties. Women's rights are severely curtailed, and they are largely excluded from education, employment, and public life. Freedom of expression, including media and artistic expression, are heavily restricted. Minorities often face discrimination and persecution under their rule. The Taliban's strict interpretation of Islamic law lead to significant disruptions in education and healthcare system. Schools for girls are often shut down or severely limited in scope, leading to a generation of women with limited access to education. Similarly, healthcare services are constrained, especially for women, due to restrictions on their movement, access to medical facilities. Taliban's rule has historically had a negative impact on the economy. Their restrictions on trade and business activities, coupled with international isolation, lead to economic decline. While the Taliban often portrays itself as a stabilizing force, their rule has also been marked by violence and insecurity. Their insurgency against the Afghan government and foreign forces has resulted in significant casualties among civilians, security forces, and Taliban fighters themselves. The treatment of women under Taliban rule has been a focal point of international concern. The rollback of women's rights could have profound social implications and impacts women's participation in education, their workforce, and the public life. The implications of Taliban rule are far-reaching, impacting various aspects of society and governance, human rights, and international relations. Their return to power raises concerns about the future of Afghanistan's stability, security, and the rights of its people, particularly women and minorities. The situation is fluid, and the international community's response will play a critical role in shaping the trajectory of the country. As we reflect on the history and the implications of Taliban, it's important to remember the value of dialogue, diplomacy, and the promotion of human rights. The Afghan people deserve a future that offers them safety, security, and the opportunity to thrive. Let's hope for a peaceful resolution that respects the right and aspirations of all Afghans. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history and its impact on the present day. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Thank you.